Welcome to Iron Summit, the podcast where we dive deep into the art and science of becoming your best self, blending expert insights on strength training, smart recovery, optimal nutrition, and mindset mastery to help you elevate your game.
What's up, guys? If you're looking to level up your training, click the link in the description and check out the Iron Summit Gains Emporium. Our strength training plans are designed to help you pack on muscle, and with our software, you can track every workout right from your phone. Plus, you'll have direct access to us for any questions along the way. Don't just train, level up your training.
We're live.
All right, we're live today. We got Jon Heck. It's a special episode. You're one of very few that's on the podcast that's bigger than Max. So it's a good stat for sure. But Jon, you played football at the University of North Carolina, and then after you got a certified nutritionist and strength and conditioning coach. You've worked pretty much in all over the industry with Division I college athletics, NFL, in the private sector. And then also you've done your own form of strength training with powerlifting and a bunch of different competition forms. So just a real blend of like the science, art, and practicing everything. So thanks for coming on, Jon.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Appreciate you having me. And you said not many guys are bigger than the co-host. Is that correct? I haven't met either of you guys in person. So
That is correct.
He's a big boy.
I guess you could say that, but not as big as you. I'm like
Max like 260 was 260, right?
250, 260.
Okay. Respect. Yeah, I'm currently gaining weight right now. I'm in my annual hypertrophy phase, so I weighed in at a svelte 320 this morning. So we're growing, boys. We're growing.
Heck yeah. How tall are you?
6'7".
Yeah, that's quite a bit bigger than I am.
Yeah, few humans are bigger, but although a lot of the clients that I work with a lot of the top strongman competitors. They make me feel small.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Who's the biggest?
I've got a guy named Bryce Johnson. He took 5th place at Strongest Man on Earth this past year, and he just competed at the Rogue Invitational. He is 6'6", 415.
Whoa.
That's insane.
And it's not a fat 415 either. That it is a freakish 415.
What's your grocery bill look like?
Oh, yeah, expensive, man. Pretty expensive. That's easily my biggest life expense by far. So I make two trips to the grocery store weekly.
Yeah. What's your like maintenance calories and macros if you track those loosely?
Yeah. Maintenance for me, it'd probably be in the ballpark of, I usually just go by the macros. I don't really track the calories, but
macros.
I usually just do the good old gram of protein per pound of body weight. So, 320 to 350 grams of protein. And then I'd probably maintain body weight on 600-700 grams of carbs daily. I keep my fats relatively low, but right now I follow a carb cycling plan. I write my own diets, but I'll do a couple high carb days a week where I'm getting in about 1,100 grams of carbs plus a cheat meal. And then on my medium days, I'm getting about 950 grams of carbs.
Wow.
And then on my low carb days, I drop it back to about 500 grams. So today's a low day for me.
A nice low 500 grams of carbs.
Yeah.
Well, when you've built a metabolism like I have over the years, your capacity to handle more carbohydrates increases drastically.
For sure. So. I love carbs. I want to actually, maybe we can start by getting into that, but before we hop into why carbs are awesome, because I think this is like a trend on hating on carbs that I hate that trend. But how do you get in most of your carbs? Because I eat like on high days like 600-700, maybe sometimes 800, and that's like it gets hard to get in that many carbs. So like, what are some tricks you use to get in that many carbs?
Yeah, so on my high days, I keep my fats very low, but I'll do kind of a 60-40 split between kind of complex carb sources and then sugary processed sources. So compared to a medium day where it's going to be all pretty much complex carbs, white rice, oatmeal, potatoes, stuff like that. On my high carb days, I'll use about 60% of my carbs from white rice, oatmeal, potatoes, but then I'm getting the other 40% from sourdough bread, from honey, fat-free pancake mix, maple syrup. I just started using a little bit of fruit juice. I'll eat a lot of fruit. I use a product a lot called cream of rice, which is, it's just a powdered white rice, and I use a brand, no affiliation, but the company's called Pride Foods. It's rice and grinds. It's flavored. They do like chocolate brownie, blueberry muffin, but it makes like a really good pudding texture. So I'll do a big bowl of that. I'll put in honey. I'll put in frozen fruit. I'll easily get in 250 grams of carbs in a bowl like that, and do it pre or post workout. Another little hack that I'll use sometimes for like my big guys, canned pie filling, which is going to be super carb dense and no fat, very easy to eat, tastes really good. But you know, that's on the high days where I'm purposely utilizing some simple sugars to, you know, if I try to get in 1100 grams of carbs all from white rice and oatmeal and potatoes, I'm just going to be bloated as hell, and just it's not going to be manageable. Whereas some of those sugary processed sources, it's just a little bit ease of digestion.
Are you eating like leaner cuts of protein too, so you're not gut bombing with some fats, or what kind of proteins are you eating?
Yeah, so I keep my proteins pretty damn lean. So on my training days, medium or high carb days, I'm using primarily chicken breast. I'll do in my first and last meal, I'll make a big egg white scramble. I'll throw one whole egg in there. And then post workout, it's non-fat Greek yogurt, whey isolate. So very low fat from all my protein sources. On my non-training days, I'll bring my fats up a little bit and I'll get lean red meat in. So like on a day like today, two of my meals are going to come from 93.7 ground beef. If I want to change up, I'll do a salmon or a sirloin steak. But yeah, on the days where I'm pushing the carbs, all my protein sources are really lean.
That makes sense to
Yeah.
kind of lighten the load on the gut. Take us through why you like carbs and kind of how you use them, why you cycle them, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I do a lot of, you know, my coaching is primarily nutrition coaching. I work, probably 70% of the people I work with, it's nutrition. A lot of the content I put out, you know, my YouTube channel, Instagram, it's largely nutrition philosophy. And one of the topics that I talk on the most is exactly this. It's trying to break this anti-carb narrative. In my opinion, if you're somebody who's concerned with anything performance or physique related, it's in your best interest to leverage carbohydrates. I think they are going to be an absolute potent performance enhancer. They are going to allow you to build a metabolism. You know, carbohydrates, they're our body's primary fuel source, right? And I want to, if you're trying to be a high performer, trying to carry a lot of muscle mass, well, your body's got to be like a race car. And we want to put fuel in the race car so we can drive the car fast, drive the car far. And our preferential fuel source is going to be carbohydrates. And unlike fats, carbs can be stored as energy. They can be stored as glycogen. Carbs, you know, per gram of carbohydrates going to be lower calorie by over twice that of fats. You know, there's going to be 4 calories in 1 gram of carbohydrate compared to 9 calories in 1 gram of fat. So you know, if you're dieting, you're able to eat a large food volume from carbohydrates for much lower calorie density. You know, when your glycogen stores are saturated, loaded up with carbs, your force production is going to be higher in training. You're going to have better training sessions, higher outputs. You're going to lift heavier weights, do more reps. Your recovery capacity is going to be higher when carbohydrates are in the mix. You can build a metabolism with carbohydrates, and carbs, just physiologically speaking, are going to be the body has a much harder time storing them as body fat compared to dietary fat, which has a much higher chance of being stored as body fat. Shocking. The name fat is literally, I mean, but if you're eating a surplus of calories and a lot of it's coming from fat, chances are you're going to be storing that as fat, and it's going to digest slower. It's going to slow things down. And that's not to demonize fats by any means. I mean, we need to have a baseline level of healthy fats in for a number of health purposes to keep the system up and running. But I try to turn people into carbohydrate processing machines. for anyone who's trying to build muscle, get shredded lean. Certainly anyone who's trying to be big, strong, fast, explosive.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And what would you say to the people who like have some of the arguments against carbs, like elevates your blood sugar, builds insulin resistance, like the higher levels of A1C over time lead to, like chronic disease, inflammatory disease. What would you
Yeah,
say to
so
arguments?
So there needs to be some strategy with the way that you're building your diet. Number one, I think a huge component of all this is you need to be training. You need to be moving. So everyone I'm working with, I'm making sure that they're staying active. They're keeping a high step count and they're training hard. They're training effectively. So in terms of making sure your body is utilizing carbohydrates as a fuel source and we're not just getting high blood sugar, insulin resistance, well, a huge remedy for that is going to be training and moving, right? If you're a sedentary individual, you're not a candidate for a high carbohydrate diet, right? I talked about fuel in the gas tank. Well, we don't need to put fuel in the gas tank if we're not driving the car. So we need to make sure we're driving the car. I think that's a point of the argument that people miss is,
Yep.
hey, yeah, you are going to become insulin resistant. You are going to get fat if you're eating tons of carbs, but you're not training, you're not moving. And then I like to use a carb cycling approach. So I'm not just hammering carbs day in and day out on my non-training days, the non-training days of anyone I'm working with. We're going to scale back the carbs quite a bit. We're going to give that blood sugar a break. These are days where we don't need the fuel. So I'm going to bring fats a little bit higher. I'm going to keep protein pretty steady, and I'm going to bring the carbs back quite a bit. And then the other thing is, if we are keeping you lean, if we're not letting you get fat, you're going to have a much harder time developing insulin resistance. So for a lot of people, before they go into a muscle gain phase or they're going to be using a calorie surplus, I'm going to put them through a fat loss phase first, get them lean, get their insulin sensitivity really high. And then we can start pushing more and more food in an increasing strategic manner. So being lean, training and moving, and then making sure you're kind of periodizing and cycling your carbohydrate intake. Those are ways where you will leverage carbs as a weapon and it's not going to become an enemy. And people kind of demonize insulin. Insulin is a highly potent anabolic hormone. There's a reason that bodybuilders inject insulin as a performance enhancing drug. And insulin is going to be anti-catabolic. So when we're training, we're in a catabolic state. We're not, actively building muscle while we train. But if you have an insulin spike while you're training, whether you're a bodybuilder injecting it, which I'm not recommending to your audience, but I like to use an intra workout shake consisting of carbohydrates. We're going to spike insulin around that training window, which is going to have an anti-catabolic effect. And then as insulin is released, it's a storage hormone. So it's going to be shuttling those carbohydrates and helping into the muscle, and your muscle is going to be uptaking amino acids, uptaking electrolytes. So insulin is a tool when you can harness it and use it to your advantage. And, there's the word insulin. It's like Voldemort for a lot of people, where it's just this automatically bad thing. Oh, it's going to get you fat.
Yeah.
And then I also think a lot of people, they incorrectly label a certain diet or food as, oh, that's a high carb diet. That's a high carb food, when in reality, it's a high carb and high fat diet. So I always use the example of the blueberry muffin. So, most people would look at a blueberry muffin and think, oh, that's a quintessential example of a carbohydrate. Well, if you look at like a Costco blueberry muffin, there's going to be about 75 grams of carbs in it and then 35 grams of fat. Now you do that macro math that I was talking about, 9 calories per gram of fat, 4 calories per gram of carb. There's actually more calories coming from the fat in the blueberry muffin. And I think people make that mistake a lot, is they're eating these foods or they've gotten fat eating in a certain way that they associate, oh, that's high carb diet. Well, yeah, it's high in carbs, but it's also sky high in fat. Okay, you can't have both. You can't be high carb and high fat. That's how you just eat yourself into an uncontrolled surplus. And that is how you become insulin resistant. So when I'm advocating for a higher carb diet, it needs to also take into account the low fat component. And when you're talking about low fat carbohydrates, you're talking about white rice and sweet potatoes and fruit, oatmeal, things like that.
Listen up. Ryan and I, we're not usually big fans of pre-workouts. As Ryan and I have discussed a lot in the past, they're either usually full of shit, way underdosed on the good stuff, and overdosed on the stim. Thankfully for us, we have had our prayers answered. Code Nutra just launched their all-natural organic pre-workout called Code Nectar. If Ryan and I were to design a pre-workout, this would be it. 150 milligrams of caffeine from natural sources, green tea and guarana, beetroot extract for the vasodilation, and L-theanine to smooth all that out. Best part, it's all delivered by honey and Redmond's real salt. That's a good pre-workout. Go get some. CodeNutra.com and use code IRON for 15% off.
How do you
man.
think about that with like a sport like wrestling? Like, you know, Max and I wrestled in college, and you know, one of the best things I feel like wrestling taught me was like understanding how different macronutrients, you know, affect how you perform. And when you're in a calorie deficit and you're cutting weight, and you're already like low carbs as it is, you know, you're trying to get your carbs around a workout, make sure that you're recovering and feeling, you know, fueling up for a practice, without blowing out your, you know, optimal amount of calories if you weren't cutting weight. And then I think in that aspect, you know, I've definitely changed since I stopped wrestling to not worrying about fats as much, because when you're low calories and you're lean, I felt like just like hormonally, like my body was always craving fats. And like you said, you can blow out your calories quickly, but just like manipulating those in a sport where you're cutting weight for your sport.
Yeah, so I mean, you hit a good point there, which is consolidating your carb intake around training, around practices. Now, this will vary from individual to individual. If I'm working with somebody who needs to make a weight class, ideally I'd like to do some of their body fat cutting on the front end earlier, you know, in the off season, so we don't have to have them in a calorie deficit as they're approaching competition. So, you know, I'll admit I'm not overly familiar with the schedule and season of typical, you know, collegiate wrestling and things like that. And so I'm not really up to speed on how frequently you guys compete throughout the year. But assuming there's, you know, an extended off season period, I would love to use that time to sort of diet the body fat off, so you're not having to be in a major calorie deficit as you're prepping for competition. Now, sometimes it's not, you know, you can't do that with everyone. So I tried to, and then we got to look at, okay, you know, what kind of a water cut can we get away with a guy to make weight? I mean, there's some guys who, you know, I would keep their food pretty high and keep their body weight relatively high relative to their weight class. And then if it's a guy who can do an effective water cut, we might do a bigger, more aggressive water cut. And that's something that, you know, I'm sure, you know, as wrestlers, I'm sure you guys have gone through some, you know, old school water cut approaches. I mean, I see high school wrestlers, you know, they got the trash bag on and they're just old school suffering to cut weight, and they're not doing it under the supervision of a coach. I don't know if you guys watch MMA much. I interviewed a guy named George Lockhart on my podcast, who was Conor McGregor's nutritionist, Tyson Fury's nutritionist, who works with some of these top MMA fighters, and he's really a specialist in doing weight cuts for fights. And I mean, for some of these guys, he would do a water cut and have them lose like, you know, 25 pounds over the course of a day or two to make weight. And certain guys, their body is more receptive to that. Certain guys, it's going to be a much harder time to do the water cut. So that really affects the long-term vision of, okay, how much weight do we need to cut on the front end? How heavy can we keep him? How much water can we cut, you know, right before the competition? But anyway, back to the original point. If you are somebody who does need to be in a deficit as you're approaching the meet, as you're approaching competition, using that carb cycling approach where we're trying to keep carbs as high as we can on your major workout days, your major practice days, consolidating a lot of those carbs pre, intra, and post practice. And then using your non-training days to be in a relatively aggressive deficit to pull the weight off. So there's kind of a number of strategies that we can use there. That's largely an individual.
Yeah, those are all great points. And college wrestling, I think like one of the hardest things is it is the frequency, and then it's 2-hour weigh-ins. So you just have to be, very strategic in your water cut. But I think your point on losing the weight and getting the body, like you should be as lean as you possibly can be going into season, so then you can fuel properly throughout the season. And that's something wrestlers don't do a great job of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ideally, like the off season, that's the time to focus on body composition. In season, I'd rather not have a guy in a deficit. Like I'd rather be eating to not to gain or lose weight, but eating to fuel training and fuel performance. Which is why I always encourage athletes, hey, in your off season, this is the time. If you got to gain weight, let's gain weight now. If you got to lose body fat and get leaner, let's do that now. That way we can keep your food, your fuel higher in season where you really need it.
Yeah. I think it's a great point. The problem with wrestling sometimes is like sometimes guys are a little big for a weight class. The season gets long, you're weighing in. But I think to your point, like I always felt like, being in the off season, if you did it in the, before season started, you had such a better time in season when you didn't have to drop 20 pounds, the first week of competition of actual, body weight, not just manipulating water. And those kind of guys get hurt because they're like kill themselves for that weekend. Moving on to what are your thoughts on like cardio for somebody maybe outside of, just wrestling world, just in general, when you're trying to put on muscle, you're trying to, you're slamming 900 grams of carbs. How do you think about cardio in your training plan when you're bulking and, you're going to have to eat those calories back, but I would assume that you'd think there's some value in, the heart health and being able to train harder with cardio.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I just put a post out about this. I put a video on YouTube too. If you'd asked me this several years ago, I'd be like more along the lines of, oh, you don't need as much cardio. Like, let's just spend as much time as possible outside of training, just eating and resting and recovering and growing. I've definitely evolved on that point. I would say as you get bigger and your body weight's going up, you need your fitness level to keep up with that. You need your work capacity, your aerobic capacity, your cardiovascular capacity to match your increases in body weight. If like right now I'm in my weight gain phase. So if I gain 30, 40 pounds over the course of this 16-week period, well, if I'm not doing any cardio, as I gain weight, I'm just going to get more and more and more out of shape. And my output in the gym is going to decrease. And that's key. Like I've got to be at my best in the gym. I've got to be able to produce maximum amounts of force. I have to recover between sets. I have to be able to push these hard, intense sets to failure, recover, and then hit the next set. I've got to make sure that my output in the final exercise of the session is as high as it was as the first exercise in the session. And if your work capacity, your general fitness is low, you are not going to be able to do that. You will not move the same weights for the same amount of reps later in those training sessions, which you need that to grow. You need that to drive hypertrophy. So yeah, too many people get caught up in this like cardio kills your gains, the interference effect narrative. And, to an extreme that could be true. Like I'm not out there advocating, go run 10 miles a day or something like that. But like I'm doing 15 minutes of zone 2 cardio at the end of all my training sessions. I'm making a concerted effort to stay active throughout the day. I'm trying to keep my step count high, trying to get 8,000 to 10,000 steps daily. And as I gain weight, I continue staying active. I'm continuing to do my cardio. My cardiovascular fitness matches the weight gain, and I'm able to continue to have effective training sessions, recover between sets, recover between training sessions. My heart is able to keep up with all the added weight. As you're putting on additional muscle, well, your body's got to be able to effectively pump blood to that new muscle and deliver oxygen and nutrients to that new muscle tissue. And your body's going to fall behind in that regard if your general fitness is falling to the wayside. So If you're in a hypertrophy phase and a gain phase, and by the end of that thing, you're getting winded going up a flight of stairs, or you're doing, a big set of squats, and then you're on the floor and gassed and questioning your existence before the next set, you've screwed yourself, right? And the lack of ability to push hard in the subsequent sets, that's going to be far more detrimental to hypertrophy than any of the calories you might burn doing cardio will. And plus, it's going to help me stay leaner. It's going to help me, like you said, stay insulin sensitive. I'm hammering a surplus of carbohydrates. By doing cardio, by getting a high step count, I'm able to stay more insulin sensitive and better utilize carbohydrates.
Yeah. I think a couple interesting and important points you touched on. One, you said you're doing zone 2, 15 minutes after training, high step count, but it's not like you're killing yourself with HIIT or doing like an hour and a half in zone 3 on the Stairmaster. Like you're doing an amount of cardio that you can still recover from with your primary training goal, which is hypertrophy right now.
Yeah, exactly. And in the phase leading into this hypertrophy phase, I was doing more of that high intensity interval training, doing circuit stuff. My training in the weight room was higher volume, short rest intervals, supersetting exercises, and then capping off the session with, instead of zone 2, I was doing, high intensity prowler pushes, med ball slams, flipping tires, farmer carries, high speed, every minute on the minute type stuff. So my fitness and conditioning was at a very high level going into the gain phase. And then, okay, now I want all my main stressors to be coming from the hypertrophy training in the weight room. And I can kind of maintain my fitness with more of the low intensity zone 2 stuff and the walking without putting additional stress on the system with the higher intensity cardio.
Do you always proceed like a longer hypertrophy phase with a more metabolic focused phase like that? Is that something you do a lot?
That's become something I've evolved on in recent years. So yes, nowadays that is what I try to set my year up for. I break the year up into phases, both from a nutrition, body composition standpoint, but then the training mirrors that. So, I'll go through my big cutting phases, and then there's kind of this transition phase between the cut and the gain phase. And during that transition phase, that's where I really focus more on the conditioning, the metabolic stuff, and just going into that gain phase in really good shape. That's my main goal there.
So, and then during a game phase, you're doing mostly hypertrophy focused training.
Yep.
And then
So
what
I'm
are you
doing
doing during a cut? Sorry, what are you doing during the cut phase? Yeah.
So during the cut, I've taken different approaches. Sometimes I'll do more of a strongman type training approach. Sometimes I'll do kind of powerlifting type stuff. Sometimes I'll do a true bodybuilding type approach. When it comes to the cutting phase, you can effectively lose body fat using a number of different training approaches. And, I tend to advocate for like, hey, use a training approach that you love, that is going to be motivating for you, that you're going to enjoy doing as you get into the dog days of a diet. And it's something that you go in the gym like fired up to do. From a pure bodybuilding physique standpoint, it'd probably be ideal to continue, still do a bodybuilding style training approach. So you're optimally, hitting the target muscle tissues. But at the end of the day, like I've gotten shredded lean, like I said, doing strongman type training. I've gotten shredded lean doing squat, bench, deadlift type stuff. My most recent cut, I was doing kind of a hybrid power building approach where I would do a big compound barbell movement, like an overhead press or an incline bench. I'd do some sort of a barbell squat where there's a front squat or a back squat or a Zercher squat, and then some form of a barbell hinge, whether it was RDLs, stiff leg deadlifts, conventional deadlifts. And for me, my thought process just being like, I want to do training that I love, that I enjoy, that I can really feel motivated to attack when my food is low and my energy is low. Like right now in this hypertrophy phase, training from like a on paper exercise selection standpoint, it's kind of robotic. It's a lot of machines, cables, dumbbells. Now I'm training with very high intensity, but it's on paper, it's very monotonous. And like I said, as I get really low food, really kind of low energy, low motivation, that can become mentally taxing for me. So having more of that, hey, let me go with a training approach that I'm just really fired up to do. That's really mentally engaging. That's something that I factor in. Whereas now, like my food's high, like I feel great. I've got all the energy in the world. Now it becomes much more about what do I consider truly optimal to stimulate hypertrophy.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a great answer because, what you're going to consistently do is going to be better than, not following the perfect plan. Um, Two questions for you, I guess. What does your split currently look like? I know you said it's a little more robotic and a little bit more machines right now. And then the second question is, how do you decide when it's time to switch your phases? Like, when are you like, okay, I've bulked enough? Is there like a body fat percentage, or you're just like, hey, I'm feeling fluffy at this point, I feel like I've put on some good size? And then on the reverse of that, how do you decide when to stop a cut and reverse into your bulks?
Yeah, good questions. So right now I'm utilizing a 4-day split. It's an upper lower split. So I've got 2 upper body sessions, both of which are push pull. And then my 2 lower body sessions, one is more quad dominant, one is more, glute, hamstring, posterior chain dominant. Um, so like upper body A right now, it's a first movement's going to be a shoulder press variation, and I'm going to pair that with some sort of, more of an upper back row. So pronated grip, T-bar row, chest supported row, something like that. And then my next upper body day, it's going to be more of a chest press focus, combined with more of a lat focused pull down. So, on that day, I'll do the lat pull downs, pull ups, stuff like that. And then on my quad dominant lower body day, it's some sort of a squat variation, whether that's hack squat, heels elevated, narrow stance Smith squat. And then on the posterior chain focus day, it's going to be, some sort of a heavy hinge movement. I've got an RDL in right now where I'll do a machine hip thrust, some stuff like that. Now, in terms of the duration, I want to give myself a minimum of 16 weeks to grow. Muscle building is a very slow process. Now, if you're a competitive athlete, you're not going to have a 16-week off season to just focus on hypertrophy. But someone like me, I've got the year to schedule as I see fit. So I'm going to give myself a minimum of 16 weeks to grow, and I'll give myself a maximum of, 20, maybe 22 weeks. And whether I cut it at 16 weeks or push it all the way to 22 weeks, I'll kind of determine that based on body fat levels. If I get to a point, it's like week 18 and I'm evaluating myself and I'm like, okay, body fat levels have really started to accumulate here. You get to that point, you're no longer going to be effectively building muscle. The other feedback I'm looking at is my appetite and digestion. At a certain point at the end of an effective gain phase, appetite's going to start to diminish. Food is going to become more of a chore. You're going to find you're just less receptive to eating all of your meals. Then the body fat starts to creep up on you a little bit. And that's usually my sign of, okay, time to start finding that exit ramp. And or looking at progress in training. If I'm getting that feedback from the body and I'm starting to plateau in the gym, okay, that's definitely my sign to switch gears here. Now, if I'm still like, man, I'm still setting PRs on a weekly basis in training, I might scale the food back a little bit, but I'm going to keep on pushing, because at the end of the day, continuing to progress in the gym is going to be really the driving factor of hypertrophy. So I'd love to be able to extend myself through a 18, 20 week phase where I'm continuing to make progress in the gym. I'm continuing to effectively handle my calorie surplus. Body fat levels have probably climbed up, but they're still in check. I'm still acceptably lean. So I'll try to transition. Like, I don't want to get to the point where it's like, oh shit, I went too far. I want to get to the point where it's like, okay, if I push this another couple weeks, that I'm going to hit a wall, and I'll try to end it before I hit that wall. And part of that's just, experience going through it a lot myself. And then with the guys I coach, I'm able to give them that kind of unbiased feedback. And then for the cutting phase, same thought process, where I'm going to say, okay, I want this to go a minimum of, let's call it 12 weeks, because I want to diet slowly. I want to diet patiently. Now, at the end of the day, like, there will come a point where I diet till I'm shredded to the bone. Like, I mean, I diet down to 5-6% on DEXA, which is extreme. It's bodybuilding prep style. So I mean, shit, if I get to that point, well, I don't need to put, it doesn't make sense to push any further than that. There's more of a clear cut stopping point. It's like when you're growing, it's like, well, there's no clear cut ceiling. It's like, you hope you can just keep growing forever. Obviously you can't, but there's only so much body fat you can lose. Right.
Yeah.
So, if I get to a point where I'm 15 weeks into a diet, I'm like, geez, I'm looking at myself like, man, I don't have really any more body fat to lose. Okay, great. That's the stopping point. But on the flip side of that, there's biofeedback I'm going to look at. If I'm just a walking zombie, energy is extremely low, sleep is totally compromised, my hunger signaling is just sky high to where I can't focus on anything other than food. Training output is really starting to regress. Well, at that point, it becomes counterintuitive to keep pushing. So usually I'll try to give myself, about 16 weeks to diet, and give or take 2 weeks. I'm not going to diet longer than 18 weeks. Beyond that, it's like, I would make adjustments before that time to accelerate the process and make sure I get to that acceptable point before that 18-week mark. But beyond that, a calorie deficit is a stressor on the body, right? And at a certain point, you're just going to flirt with losing muscle. You're going to flirt with just tanking your metabolism. So we can't just diet down forever. So 12 to 18 weeks. And once I'm past that 12-week mark, I'm looking at myself visually, assessing body fat levels, and then assessing that biofeedback.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned DEXA. Is that your primary tool for body composition
No,
analysis?
my primary tool is the mirror, frankly. I'll use DEXA because, like, hey, it's kind of cool to see that number on the page. But at the end of the day, like, no one gives a fuck about the number. They care about, can I cuss on the show?
Yeah, heck yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, nobody cares what your body fat percentage is. It's, how do you look?
Yeah.
And for me, like, my prime is I'm past my prime with strength. I don't think I'm going to be setting lifetime PRs on deadlift and squat and stuff like that anymore. Not the level I was, but I can be freaky shredded. And that's about the visual to me. So, I don't chase the scale. I don't chase, any numerical metric. I just want, when people see the physique, to be like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean?
Are you going to get on a bodybuilding stage?
Eventually, before it's all said and done, I think I will. It's on the bucket list. I treat myself like a bodybuilder year round. I've never had the overwhelming urge to pose and get on stage in the trunks. And frankly, I'm not really traditionally built for bodybuilding, like, in terms of the actual judging criteria for bodybuilding. I'm kind of a weird build. Like, I've got long legs, short torso. So, like, the way you actually objectively judge bodybuilding, like, I don't quite have the, like, flowy physique that would be winning shows. Now I can get, like, pretty freaky looking in terms of the amount of tissue I'm carrying, the body fat levels. But just knowing that I'm not really built to win at a high level in bodybuilding, it's kind of been something that's kept me from doing it. But I think I would love to add it to the resume, just to, have gotten on stage at least once.
Yeah. So, I mean, I come from like, I trained my whole life for wrestling, and then I did powerlifting, sound similar to you, got hurt a bunch, had my pec reattached. And then there's just something novel about the pursuit of bodybuilding and like training specific lines of tissue and trying to grow your physique and then get really lean. Like that's the cool part of bodybuilding. I'm so with you. Like posing in trunks is probably like, it's like I would have to do it to compete in bodybuilding, not like something I'd look forward to doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sponsored by a bodybuilding company. I've got a lot of, good friends who are very high level pro bodybuilders. And, you talk to any of them, none of the bodybuilders love actually competing, right? They
It's like
love
the
the
whole thing.
process. They love the process of
Mhm.
it, but they have to compete because it's how they make their living. It's their vocation. But yeah, very few of the bodybuilders actually love, competition day the way that a traditional athlete might love game day.
Right. Yeah, it's just different.
Yeah.
Different
So
than
how do you
getting ready for a football game or strapping up for a football match. And I have one more carb question I want to make sure I get in before
go for it?
we wrap up
Go
here.
for it.
One, and I've seen very conflicting arguments on this. And you mentioned you eat a lot of fruit and fruit juice. What do you say to the people who demonize fructose?
Well, I wouldn't get the majority of my carbohydrates from fructose. Um, it's definitely not something that should be demonized. I mean, eating fruit, there's so many benefits from it. Just the micronutrients, the potassium, the fiber. They taste phenomenal. It's good for you. So I'll use, fructose sources like fruit, like honey, but it's not the majority of my carbs. So, I certainly wouldn't build a diet primarily around it, but I would absolutely incorporate it, and there's too many black and whites
I
in
know.
nutrition. Like there's too many framing of things through the lens of, oh, is it good? Is it bad? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Carbs are good, fats are good, this and that. It's like it's not about the individual single variable. It's about how does that one thing fit into the grand scheme, into the big picture of it. It's like, I mean, I've got certain guys I work with who eat tons of fruit and tons of honey and maple syrup, all fructose sources, and they're lean, they're high performers, but they've got a metabolism that supports that. Whereas I have other people who will get in, a couple small servings of fruit, and that's about it. And it's not a matter of, is fruit good, is fruit bad? Again, it's just kind of, where does it fit in for the goal at hand, that particular individual, their metabolism, their tolerances, preferences to certain things. So yeah, I would not demonize fructose, and I see it as a valuable thing to be incorporated, but not the dominant carb source.
Yeah. I think you hit it right on the head. And I think it's something, the more you learn about any subject, but particularly health, because there's so many variables, health, fitness, training, whatever you want to call it. Anytime someone's being super reductionist and trying to make something black or white, they're probably wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to talk in terms of black and whites. It's clickbaity. It's controversial. It's polarizing. It's easier to sell. This is the way. This is wrong. This is best. And it's not as sexy to talk in terms of happy mediums and kind of splitting things down the middle. I mean, you see it in any aspect of life. It's like political in politics, far right, far left. The woke liberals or the MAGA conservatives. It's less cool to talk about, hey, just kind of reasonable people kind of down the middle. I mean, you can apply that to any topic.
Yeah, it's so true. At Iron Summit, we are about getting everything we can out of our workouts and everyday lives. If you aren't wearing a pair of barefoot or wide toe box trainers, you are leaving gains on the table. The Sashi Athletics Ronin Ichi Minimalist Trainer is a perfect barefoot shoe. Not only does it perform like other major brands on the market, it is actually good looking. Even my wife says so. Get a pair today for 10% off with the code Iron Summit 10. Link is in the bio.
What are your thoughts on like macro or micronutrients? It sounds like you eat a lot of the same things throughout the day. You're eating so much food, I'm sure you're hitting stuff. And then kind of a side, B question. Do you think multivitamins are like trash? Like I feel like there's a big camp of people where they're like, you might as well take it. Who cares? And then some people are like, it's not doing anything for you. Just eat real food. And obviously that's the best to start, but maybe you have some cracks in your diet.
Yeah, I don't use a multivitamin. They're certainly not bad for you, but I would much rather build a diet that's going to check those boxes. And then if there's something that you're specifically having a hard time getting from whole food, to specifically supplement with that individual thing. Like, for example, magnesium. Like magnesium is a very difficult one to get from whole food in your diet alone. So oftentimes I'll have people supplementing with magnesium. Now, like your typical multivitamin, it's going to have like a million different things in it, but they're going to be very, very small amounts in it. So most of that stuff will check that box with whole foods. And then if there's something we're deficient in, like, hey, let's just specifically supplement with that thing at a higher dose. Right. But I put a huge emphasis on micronutrient intake, electrolyte intake, having a high diversity of nutrients. Even when I am in the deepest, most restrictive phase of my diet, like my diet's very nutrient diverse. Like my most recent cut, in the morning I was doing egg whites, a whole egg scrambled with spinach and peppers and mushrooms. I would have oatmeal with a little bit of a natural almond butter and triple berry mix. And then, throughout the middle of the day, it's chicken breast and white rice, but I'm also incorporating, I'll use vegetables in there. I like to do a mix of white rice and sweet potatoes. I like fermented foods in the diet, like kimchi or sauerkraut and kefir. Post workout, it's a Greek yogurt, which has some great benefits to it. And for the fat source there, I'm using a high cacao dark chocolate, which is a healthy fat, antioxidant, fiber source. So if you looked at my diet, even when calories are really low, it's a wide variety of things. And then in my non-training days, I'm getting in, good quality red meat, whether that's, a salmon or, the 93.7 beef, and I'll have avocado with that. And then I put a ton of value in electrolyte intake. Most people are under consuming potassium. So like intra workout, my carb source is going to be coconut water, which is super high in potassium. I'll salt all my meals with pink salt, but then also a product called no salt, which is potassium chloride. And it comes like a salt shaker. And I'll use sweet potatoes are going to be very high in potassium, so I'll try to get some potatoes in daily. Like I said, the guacamole and avocado, healthy fat sources, almond butter, whole almonds.
Yeah.
And as I get deeper into a diet, start incorporating more and more vegetables, which not only will that help just keep nutrient diversity high, but it's also going to help manage hunger. So I put a huge emphasis on that. And when the system as a whole has missing puzzle pieces, right? When you're not functioning at a high level at the cellular level internally, no process is going to be functionally optimally, whether it's fat loss or muscle gain, recovery. But when all of your micronutrient boxes are checked and adequately checked, everything is going to work better. You're going to sleep better. You're going to train better. You're going to recover better. So I put a huge emphasis on it.
I love it. So we talked about macros. You just hit on micros. Third thing, like talk about clickbait, social media. It's everywhere now. But how do you think about organic versus non-organic, toxins, glyphosate usage, all that stuff? Like, do you worry about that? Do you not worry about it? Talk to us about it.
Well, most of my diets are going to be built around, single ingredient, non-processed, whole foods. So, you're going to kind of filter through a lot of that type of stuff. If you're built, I use the term kill it, pick it, grow it foods. So if you can hunt it, fish it, kill it, you can grow it in the ground, you can pick it out of a tree. It's probably a good bet to incorporate in your diet. Now, in terms of like organic versus grass fed, stuff like that. I really don't put too much of an emphasis on it. A lot of the times, foods will have that label, but you never really know the true conditions in which the plants were grown. Like the criteria to technically get a product labeled organic, it's not actually always the most above the table truthful process.
It's expensive.
Similar
Yeah.
with like the grass fed type thing. There's a lot of companies out there that are dishonestly putting those labels on food and then jacking up the prices. But I mean, outside of the that conspiracy line of thinking, if you perfect world, if you just said, hey, here's some grass-fed meat, non-grass-fed meat, take your pick, the prices are the same, sure, I'd choose grass-fed. If you said, hey, all the food's organic, all versus non-organic, price is the same, have your pick, I would choose organic. But that's not the case. So I really don't put that much value on it. I don't think the difference in price really justifies the actual way it plays out in the real world.
Yeah. And I think where people, and I think it's easy to get this wrong in today's environment, but people are putting that above getting their macros and their micros dialed in. And it's putting the cart before the horse a little bit.
Yeah, and everyone likes to tell people that they're, oh, my food's organic, this and that. You really don't see that playing out in any sort of meaningful, measurable way in terms of how it's affecting them. But like I said, when it comes to more of the highly processed foods that maybe do have some additives, things like that are not going to be great for you. Again, it's not something I want to demonize. Like, I do a cheat meal every week where I'll eat whatever the hell I want. Like, I'll eat fast food, I'll eat delicious processed food. So I mean, all these things can be consumed in moderation. But as long as my diet's primarily built around kill it, pick it, grow it foods, that's going to eliminate a lot of those issues.
I hate to go here, but I just think you're such a wealth of knowledge on nutrition, and it's still a hot button topic. What are your thoughts on seed oils?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think if there's something out there that's maybe there is some truth behind some of the negative consequences. Some seed oils probably are not going to be ideal. You're talking about like hydrogenated oils, peanut oil. I mean, I guess those aren't seed oils, but you know I think just the term seed oils has gotten, again, just a little bit overly demonized. It's more about the context of stuff. So I prefer to use like an extra virgin olive oil or a macadamia nut oil over something like a grapeseed oil or even coconut oil, things like that. So if your diet has a lot of saturated fat in it, which if you're consuming a lot of seed oils, it will, that can be an issue. And I would associate it more with just the overall amount of saturated fats, polyuns, or the amount of saturated fats that you're taking in, as opposed to just the ingredient itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What about you mentioned macadamia nut oil. What about like an avocado oil? How do you think about
Yeah,
butter?
I love avocado oil. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, any avocado product, avocado oil, guacamole, whole avocados are a phenomenal fat source.
Awesome.
Butter?
No, I usually stay away from those sorts of fats. Butter's delicious, obviously, but it's rarely something that I'm gonna program into a diet. I prefer to get my fat sources from, like I said, extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, avocados, guacamole, almonds, almond butter, cashews, some whole eggs, dark chocolate. things like that. I much prefer that as opposed to getting, butter, really fatty meats, whole milk, and things like that. And again, that's not to demonize butter. It's just, if you're consuming a lot of butter, it's going to be very easily just to get the fat content too high too quickly.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's a really practical piece of advice, is like, be very intentional, or at least be aware of your fat sources. Because what I think where people go really astray with fat is they'll eat their eggs and their avocado and their fattier slice of meat and then put butter on stuff and cook in oil, like, and that's where it just gets way out of check. If you're just being intentional with like, hey, I'm gonna get my fats from this today, you're winning the battle. You're winning 90% of the battle.
Yeah. Most people who are overweight, they are not overeating carbohydrates. They're overeating fat. And I mean,
So
it's
easy, dude.
exactly what you said. People are so focused on the carbs. They are just like blissfully unaware of just how many calories from fat that
It's
they're
like,
getting.
yeah, well, it's like the classic white girl. I'm going to get a healthy salad at lunch, but that salad has like 55 grams of fat in it from like egg,
Yeah.
bacon, oil, like a fattier cut of meat. There was no
Yeah.
carb.
No,
There was a ton of calories.
exactly. Yeah. Just what people like consider on surface level, like, oh, this is like healthy, low calorie food. It's like, no, it's really not. People just have no idea just the amount of hidden calories that are really in a lot of these foods.
Yeah. And fat is so palatable. It's so easy to eat.
So
So much. It's easy to eat a lot of calories. Like,
yeah,
try
I could
eating 500 calories of white rice. Not very fun.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is like, when you're building a diet around low fat carbs, like, you can make a massive plate of white rice and potatoes and fruit, and it's going to be pretty low calorie, but it's going to be a ton of food compared to, you can eat a chunk of cheese and cook your food in butter, and you've surpassed the calorie load of that huge plate of carbs.
Yeah. That's a really practical piece of diet advice for sure.
Yeah, John, recently you were talking, I saw on a podcast, just kind of saying, carrying a bunch of extra muscle is obviously hard on your body. And I'm paraphrasing here, but like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. Not to that degree, but tell me how you think about longevity and what your thoughts are. Obviously training's changed over the years. You've told me, or told us that you're not gonna, be chasing crazy squat deadlift PRs right now. But obviously you're training super hard. You're throwing around a lot of weight right now still. What's your long-term goal, and how do you think that changes, fitness throughout your next maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 years?
Yeah, good question, man. I'm gonna have to figure that out as I go, and I'm gonna have to, change things up. I'd like to be around to watch my kid grow up, and, hopefully be around for my grandchildren, things like that. The reality is, I mean, the lifestyle I live is not conducive to living to be 90 years old. Carrying a ton of muscle tissue, eating tons of food, and trying to like be as big and strong as possible, not conducive to longevity. And I was on the Judd Lionheart podcast, and we clipped that one bit of the conversation, which actually got like tons of hate on it. And people kind of took it out of context, because I had said in that clip, if I wanted to live to be 100, I would need to start losing as much muscle as I possibly could and eating as little as possible. And like, for me, that's true. Like, I need to downsize at a certain point in order to extend my life. I mean, it's kind of the, you look at Great Danes versus small breeds of dogs. Like, Great Danes have a life expectancy of like 8 years old. And that's because they're just a big breed. Like, when you're a big human being, your heart just has to work that much harder over an extended period of time. Your organs just have to work that much harder, keeping a big body up and running. I mean, it's putting miles on a car. At a certain point, if you put hundreds of thousands of miles on a car, the car's going to break down. And the more muscle you carry, the more food you're eating, the harder you're training, you're putting miles and miles and miles on that car. So at a certain point, yeah, I'll need to downsize. I certainly won't be able to be 300 plus pounds anymore. I'll have to lose a bunch of muscle tissue. And, I'm sure as the years go by, like I'll be okay with that. I'll always train. I'll always be in shape. But, over the course of my career, my legacy and fulfillment will come a lot more from coaching and from hopefully my podcast and just my role and my voice in the industry. So as I grow in that aspect, priorities change a little bit over time, and it'll be less about being the biggest, strongest, most jacked human I could possibly be, and more about passing along good information and helping the next generation chase after those kinds of goals. But yeah, there will come a point where I'll have to downsize. And, if you're somebody you're trying to maximize longevity, they did a study with rats where they basically kept the rats on the brink of starvation. And the rats lived to be the equivalent of like 200 years old in human years. And there's some real truth to that. When you are able to just keep your system working as easy as possible, keeping the metabolism from burning through tons and tons of food, keeping the organs from having to churn through tons of food, you're saving a lot of miles on the system. So there's some absolute benefits to longevity for training and making sure your bone mineral density stays high, and keeping an adequate amount of lean mass on you. But for the most part, longevity is going to favor smaller humans. So I think just general stress also is going to be a huge driver of pushing you to an early grave. So I mean, like you look at the monks out in Asia. I mean, who are living to crazy lifespans. I mean, they're extremely zen, peaceful, very small individuals. They're not ripping heavy deadlifts and eating 1,000 grams of carbs and 250 pounds. Right? And they're not fucking stressed out, career driven, and like they're very low stress. They're very small bodies. They're not taxing their body with tons of food. And there's real truth to that. But yeah, I mean, to kind of your original point, here for a good time, not a long time. Like my goal is not to live to be 100. Like I'd much rather live a highly fulfilling life and live to be, I don't know, 75 than live to be 95. But those last 20 years are just, unfulfilling and boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And you got medicine on your side, John. We got we'll see where it all goes.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, there may just encapsulate all of our consciousness into some sort of AI, or merging of humans and AI. Like, who knows where all this stuff is headed?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we may live to be immortal, in the next few decades.
For sure. Man, we could spend, we're coming up on time here. We could spend another hour on that topic alone. But really appreciate your time today. Super interesting discussion. I love that we focused on nutrition and really kind of dialed in on that. But we'll definitely have to get you back on because I got a lot more questions.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, thanks, John. Maybe real quick, shout out your socials, shout out your podcast, and then we'll get links and put them in the description as well so people can find you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I've got a podcast. It's called the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. It's on YouTube, on Spotify, and Apple. And then I put out 2 additional long form videos on my YouTube channel weekly. If you just search Jon Heck, the handle is Hammer Chisel Performance. And then I post frequently on Instagram. It's _Heck71. Just search Jon Heck. And then you can go to my website, hammerchiselperformance.com, for my coaching services, training programs, ebooks, and all my resources.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John.
Yeah.
You're the man. This was super. I had a great time, and like Max said, I think we could talk for days. So we'll definitely have to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Appreciate you having me on.